Well, it happened. We finally got a trailer for Fantastic Four First Steps, and me and my cat Mortimer over here on my lap are going to talk about it. I'm going to go through a list of small things, but overall thoughts, I liked the trailer a lot. I thought it was good. Do I think it was better than that D23 footage that we've seen that you could usually find online, although you probably can't find on YouTube? I don't know if it was better. I think it was definitely different. I imagine this is supposed to be more condensed, more of like a story. And I do think it had a narrative to it that was trying to set up for people. Where the D23 footage did not have as much of a narrative, it was more of just like kind of vibes, which I think is good and can be part of what's important about the teaser. But I do think that this felt a little bit more focused, and I like that. It's the first thing, and this has been true for a very long time. I think the score is phenomenal. I love this theme. Michael Giacchino has been crushing it, and I think he's been doing great work for Marvel on the directing side and on the score side. And I love his Speed Racer score. I think this is maybe my favorite thing he has produced. I think it is super fun, very catchy, very like memorable. I have been kind of humming it in my head this whole time since I saw it, so that's a good sign. And I like that they were like playing it a lot and it's out there because I think that marketing is what makes a score, like a theme like this, memorable, right? If you look at like the iconic film scores, you got like Jurassic Park, Jaws, Star Wars, right? All of them John Williams score. So that's obviously being John Williams helps. But also I do think those movies are movies that had sequels and have been, you know, rewatched. And I think part of what makes the score iconic is that the scenes from the score get replayed. And thinking about like that Harry Potter tune, that made it into like all the future Harry Potter trailers, which was part of why it became so memorable, is because you kept hearing it. And obviously it was also good. But I think obviously outside of like the score, the marketing is what really drives the score into the public consciousness. So I like that. But yeah, I just think that's cool. I think this score is great. I love that this trailer centered the story around Sue Storm. She was the voice of the trailer, speaking to the audience. I think we got a lot of Vanessa Kirby in here. And I think that is smart because she's the central figure here. I think Sue Storm is a character. All of the Fantastic Four characters are characters that like Marvel has done a lot with. But because the movies haven't been so successful, and that means like the exposure of the comics and like video games and stuff like that has fallen behind, people don't realize how cool characters like Reed and Sue can be, especially those two, because I think the Thing and Johnny Storm, like the pitch is pretty easy, but with Sue, like the power set and that personality of holding the team together, super important. I like Vanessa Kirby a lot for this role. I think overall the Sue was very good. I also love the decision to humanize Ben Grimm, the Thing, with cooking. I like that that was the first thing we saw him do for a couple reasons. One, obviously, Ebon Moss-Backrack, very well known for being in The Bear. I think they wanted to remind people that it's him. I think partially just because like there are a couple actors in this movie that people like to root for. Ebon Moss-Backrack, Pedro Pascal, those are two actors that like I think I could tell someone who has no interest in the Fantastic Four movie like they're in it, and they perk up and like, oh, okay. And I think that's true for a lot of actors, but I just don't think Vanessa Kirby gets that same reaction. I don't know about Joseph Quinn. I've heard that he's very popular, but I haven't seen it myself. But either way, reminding you that he is there, cool. But I think it's smart to make your first look at the Thing, not him punching, not him being sad, because he is a tragic figure, but centering that story around something that is super relatable, related to family and celebration, cooking, fun, like showing him having a good time, I think is really important for getting us as an audience on his side, right? You could start a character like that out, making him very sympathetic and make him this tragic figure from the beginning. But personally, I think that is way more effective if in the beginning we just get a little bit of fun, a little bit of like, here's why we like this character, here's why we're going to root for him. And I also think a character like Ben, who does not look human, who looks inhuman, obviously is made of CGI here, but like there's characters in things recently, like even like Sonic the Hedgehog, right? But those movies are out and they don't explain it all. But like Sonic and Shadow are fighting in space, and in my head I'm like, wait, does Sonic even like need to breathe air? Does Shadow need to breathe air? They're aliens, right? Like that's not a given. The same way that like Superman doesn't need to breathe air, and I don't think needs to eat because he's charged by the sun. The same way that Vision doesn't need to eat, but like he does to fit in. I like that we're showing like the Thing is a character that does do that. He is still very human. I think that's important. And for that same reason, I love the lack of focus on Johnny. Johnny Storm, I think, is a character people understand, and a character that everybody can get on board with pretty quickly. He is the only character, I believe, in both versions of the Fantastic Four, like both of the theatrically released versions of 2005, and then I don't remember when Silver Surfer came out, 2007 maybe, versions, and then the 2015 Fant Four Stick. Johnny Storm, I think, is the only character that fully works in both of them, because cool guy who has fun and makes jokes and stuff is an archetype that a lot of actors can play really well, and you don't need to do a ton of work to establish. And he's like, this is the fun one that everyone likes, and here he is making some jokes and being handsome, and you go, I do like him, he's cool, all right, great. Whereas I think characters like Sue and Ben do require a little bit more focus, so I like that this trailer focused on them. Now, I do think the shots of Joseph Quinn looked good, the Johnny shots looked great, which we'll get to the effects and everything. And I like the idea that he is kind of a goofball, because that is a way you can write that character. A lot of these Fantastic Four characters have been around for so long, and it's interesting because they have been written relatively consistently. I do think there are periods of Johnny Storm that have been more responsible, and then some that have been more goofball. And I'm fine with starting there. And also, I feel like he can be both, right? He can be a character that is fun and silly when he, has free time, but then when things get serious, he gets serious too. I'll say this about the effects. I watched this trailer, as a lot of you probably did, on my phone first, right? I see this, I get the notification that it's out, I'm in bed, put on my headphones, watch the trailer. Then, a little bit later, go into the living room, watch it on a TV. First look at Ben on the phone. Small, I'm sure compressed. I didn't think it looked amazing. On the TV, I think it looked much better. And I think that's because, for me, what makes Ben are those small movements. There's a bit where he puts his finger into his mouth to taste the sauce or whatever it is they're making. And there's little moments, little things that happen on his face. His eyes move around a little bit. And that makes him feel really human. But I don't think that, at least for me, gets conveyed as well on a phone. And it's the same way that people say that about like a clip they see on Twitter or something. I'll be like, oh, this trailer looks bad. Look at this screenshot. And so many times that screenshot is from like a compressed trailer. Like, of course it's not going to look that good. But I do think there's something to watching this movie on a big screen. There's other stuff with the effects that we'll talk about, but I'm hoping that that is something that like on a movie screen looks great. But overall, I'm fine with the CGI Ben. I think like there's things that are great about a practical Ben. Having Michael Chiklis in the suit was really great. One, I feel bad for Michael Chiklis because that suit seems like unbearable to wear. They had to put a little vacuum or like a fan. They had a rock that came out of, I think it was like near his butt, that they could take out and put a fan in because he got so hot while they were filming that. So like I always understand an actor being like, yeah, I don't like want to. Like I'm very sympathetic to an actor like Alan Cumming who played Nightcrawler, or Jennifer Lawrence who played Mystique in those X-Men movies, eventually being like, listen, I love making these, but I am just kind of tired. I am worn down by being in this makeup chair for 3 hours a day. And I don't think, like, I could see just them not acting as well. And I'm sure there will be people, maybe even in the comments of this, that will say, well, listen, they're actors, they're getting paid $1 million. They should have to, like, put up with a little bit. And, like, sure. And maybe, you know, they could be replaced with an actor who doesn't care about that. But if we want to get, like, the best performance out of certain actors, they can't act as well in every single situation. And maybe covered in all that makeup is just not great for them. Also, I think The Thing is a character that, like, if he is a big plastic rock man like he was in the 2005 movies, his movements are a little stiff, you know. I think they did the best with what they had, but like maybe they want him to be a little bit more athletic, maybe like more of a boxer. They want his body to move more naturally. So I understand wanting to do this with CGI. Honestly, I think it looks great. I did see multiple people say that they think Ben looks small. That Ben, especially in the big shots with the team, looks small. I think in that last shot, he maybe a setback a little bit, which obviously would make him appear a little smaller. But I also heard the same thing about, who we'll get to in the end of the trailer, Galactus. People say, oh, Galactus looks too small. I think for all of those, and for all those critiques, if you have those thoughts, before you post them, just check old comics, or check new comics or something. Just like, what is the traditional design for this character, and how has this changed? Especially because the visuals for this movie are clearly so inspired by the generation of like comics and like that decade where the Fantastic Four were introduced. At that time, the Thing was not a humongous guy. He was like as big as Reed, or like at least as big as he used to be before he got all rocked up. So, and it's same with Galactus, right? Galactus appears to be, I think, about 30 or 40 feet tall usually, which is still really big. And like, obviously he can change his size at will. And it's the same thing where like, if you are a Skrull, he appears as a Skrull. If you are a Kree, he will appear as a Kree, because Galactus is like above all that. But at the same time, like saying he looks small, sure. But in the comics, he also looks small. So, you know, your beef is not with the movie, it is with just the overall design of Galactus and Ben Grimm, the Thing, which is a beef to have, but like, if you're like, why does he look small? That's why, because sometimes he is. I am curious about the lack of Reed in this trailer, Reed Richards, played by Pedro Pascal. I think it's smart because I think it says something about where Reed is in this story, or where Reed maybe could be, is in a very guarded place, a character who has seen something and has experienced something that like he can't fully process. So like he, tries to put on this face, and this is all just watching these trailers that are out, the D23 one and then this one, and kind of getting this, but it does seem like this character, maybe a way you could write him is he could be a character who feels responsible for obviously what happened to Ben and everybody, and also has the weight of the world on his shoulders. So maybe he is not out having fun like the rest of them, or not out, in the public as much because of this great responsibility that he has to deal with. That's just an option. And I think that's backed up by the way that Sue gives him a pep talk, and she's saying like, Ben is a rock, Johnny was always like that. Like, because Reed does feel guilty and maybe is feeling like an imposter, like imposter syndrome. I love that, especially for Reed Richards. That's an interesting angle. But I saw a lot of people saying, why isn't Reed stretching? We saw every other power in some form or another. We saw Sue making what seems like a force field and also turning invisible. Obviously we saw, the Thing being the Thing, and we saw Johnny flaming on. That all looked great. And Mr. Fantastic is obviously the more complicated of those visually, because that as an effect has at times looked not great, not just with him either, with a lot of other times that this has happened on screen. And I think there's some reasons for that. One, the easier one is just like they haven't finished up that CGI yet. It's still like, 6 months until this movie comes out. So I wouldn't be surprised if like they're still working on it and maybe they're like, that's not ready for prime time yet, which is something I say blanket for this. Like, if you think the CGI looks great, that's great, because that is good. It looks good. If you think the CGI doesn't look perfect yet, doesn't look super polished, that's because it probably isn't. And I'm not saying that it's not their fault. Like, Marvel put that out there and to say like, this is what our movie's going to look like. So I think you can somewhat judge it with that, but just kind of realistically, a lot of times, especially these first teasers, there's a lot more work to be done to polish a lot of these images that is going to make them look better in the final cut. That's all I say. Judge slowly when it comes to that. So that's the obvious answer. There's like an interesting story answer, which is maybe he doesn't stretch very much. And maybe that's not even something anybody knows about him, right? We have a team of characters with superpowers that are visually like impossible to miss. Like, especially the Thing. That's a character who it's like, yeah, that guy's a rock guy. Invisible Woman, maybe she's having trouble facing when they come back from space and they're like, oh, you're part invisible. Great. Johnny, the usual way you do that is he can like take his temperature and it's like, oh, this guy is very, very warm. And then, he sets himself on fire. I could see a version of this story where Reed comes back with the stretching powers, but like not fully activating them yet. Like he can tell that something's up, but he's like, I'm not going to say anything yet because I want to do some more tests. And then maybe just pretending that he didn't get superpowers, or pretending that like his superpower is his big brain. He's even more intelligent than he was before, and having to embrace that stretchiness, that pliability, making him a character that has to become more flexible by the end of this story. That's an arc you can totally give Reed, and that is an arc that can be represented by his embrace of this superpower. I can also see a version where, yeah, people know he's stretchy, but because of the guilt he feels, he just doesn't use the power that much, especially in front of someone like Ben, because he doesn't want Ben to feel bad that he got a power that's cool. So he like doesn't throw it in Ben's face. They're like, look at me, I can make my arm really long and then grab something in the other room, because Ben is a character who's dealing with so much, and Reed specifically feels guilty about that in a way that like Johnny and Sue don't. That's an angle you can take. The cynical take here, which I think is valid, is maybe it just doesn't look great. I haven't quite figured it out yet, because this is, I would say for sure, the most difficult effect. It's something Marvel has not done, like Marvel Studios has not done, outside of Mr. Fantastic getting turned into spaghetti. But like, obviously they changed Kamala's powers because they wanted it to look better. I think that is, I can't remember, they said a million things, but like, it would be a reasonable assumption to make that one of the reasons they changed Kamala's powers is because they thought it would look too silly, or they weren't sure they could make that effect work, or they wanted to save it for Reed, which is another reason I think would make sense too. I don't think that's like a great reason, but I could see that being the reason. But like, I could see a world where they did some testing on Kamala and they were like, this isn't perfect yet, but we got to get it perfect for Reed. and maybe they're at a point where they're like, we're almost there, but we're still not quite there. That could be a thing. That could be why we're not seeing him stretch. I understand why they want to save it, though. That'll be something that'll be cool eventually. And very important to remember, this is the first teaser, so there's a lot of things we're not going to see, and that's fine. Speaking of Reed, I want to throw something out here. I think it's interesting that we saw what seemed to be two versions of like Galactus existing. We have seen Day Galactus, which is Galactus being Galactus, just walking around looking at stuff. We've also seen a shot that was in this trailer, and it came up twice, but it looked different. Once, it's just the family walking onto the balcony. Second time, there's like a whole gigantic wall of fire and smoke coming towards them. Now, that could just be later in the scene. That's an option. However, when I see something like that in one of these trailers, I'm like, oh, maybe there's other stuff in that shot. Like maybe they're hiding something, and like maybe what they're hiding is that's Galactus actually coming to Earth. Just because like that level of destruction is not something a lot of Fantastic Four villains can pull off. Now maybe Galactus comes to Earth twice. That's totally an option. But part of me was like, maybe Galactus coming to Earth during the day is a dream? Like maybe Reed, and this is all theories, none of this is backed up by like knowing anything extra about the movie besides what's in the trailer and just like knowing Fantastic Four comics. Maybe Reed knows Galactus is coming and is dreading that, and he's having nightmares, and this could also be a reason why we haven't seen a ton of him and why he seems unsure of himself, of Galactus coming to Earth, and that is Galactus coming during the day. I'm not saying this is important, this isn't even a fan theory. Part of me just wonders if like we have seen a lot of that in the trailer, and that seems like that would be a pretty late game moment, unless maybe that's a misdirect, or that is not a late game moment. That is something that appears to be that, but is really just like in Reed's head. And I don't think this is like when they do that in the X-Men movies where they make Apocalypse grow and you're like, oh, cool, he's going to grow. And then you're like, no, he's probably just going to do that in like his mind or the astral plane or something, because those Fox movies are obsessed with realism sometimes. Like this isn't that. I would imagine that this is just more of like an artistic thing. That's just a thought I'm throwing out there. I do want to connect that to a comic story that came out kind of recently that I may have even already mentioned in this video. I've definitely mentioned it before on the channel. It's called Fantastic Four Life Story. It's written by Mark Russell with art by Sean Izaki, Nolan Woodward, and Joe Caramagna. So this story, much like Spider-Man Life Story, is the story of the Fantastic Four, but told every comic, and there's like I think 5 or 6 comics, is a different decade. So it starts in the 60s and it continues 70s, 80s, 90s as if they actually aged, something that comics never do, and it frames their stories in the decades that they're taking place in. So it like will take comics, at least the Spider-Man one did this a lot. It'll take comics that are being adapted in the 2000s, like fit them into Spider-Man's life, but if Spider-Man was like a 60-year-old guy at that time. It's a really cool book. I love both of these life story books. I wish Marvel made more of them. But in Fantastic Four Life Story, the main plot point that drives the entire story. Obviously, they go into space, they get bombarded with cosmic rays, they get wonderful superpowers, and Reed gets a vision in his head of Galactus. And this plays out kind of like a Lovecraftian monster, like just madness. He sees this big monster that he knows is coming to Earth to destroy it. And for the first 3 or 4 issues of this book, it's just him trying to figure out a way to stop Galactus and like failing and trying a bunch of different things, trying to work with different people, sometimes in ways that end up making things almost worse. But it's the story of Reed becoming obsessed with Galactus for good reason, because obviously he knows that Galactus is dangerous and he's got to figure this out. I think thematically, that could be similar to what's going on in this story, where there is a Reed who's aware of Galactus and spends a lot of time trying to figure out how to solve that problem, and eventually maybe feels unsure of himself because he doesn't think he can. He doesn't think anybody can. Also, it seems like based on what people say in the trailer, the Fantastic Four maybe has not been to space since the original trip where they got bombarded with cosmic rays. Maybe that's because Reed is afraid of space because of Galactus. He doesn't want to anger Galactus, get Galactus's attention. I could totally see that being the plot here. Again, I would say read that book because it's great. Life Story, Fantastic Four, and the Spider-Man one. They're not related, but the Spider-Man one is just also very good. Part of why I think that works with what we see in this trailer and what we know about this movie is that Matt Shakman is directing this. And Matt Shakman, most people would know from working on WandaVision, and I can see a lot of the same themes that were in play in WandaVision playing out here, like this fancy, ideal, retro future aesthetic, hiding something deeper, some sort of insecurity, a character using that to mask some sort of pain or fear and hiding something from people, right? Maybe this is a Reed who knows about Galactus but didn't tell anybody. He's like, what's the point of telling people? They're just gonna freak out. I will try to solve this problem on my own. And like, I'm the world's smartest man. What are they gonna do? Find another version of me out there? Like, if I can't solve this problem, nobody can. I think that could be cool. And Matt Shakman working on this gives me a little bit of hope that the story will be somewhat subversive. There will be some sort of secret. It won't just be this very fluffy Fantastic Four movie where they like go on an adventure and fight a guy and then save the day. Like, it'll be about this family unit, especially because we saw in this teaser, they're trying to present an image. They do tours with reporters. They say, oh yeah, we have dinner together. Everything's great with the Fantastic Four. We're a family you can trust. And like, that probably means you can't in some way. And I'm interested to see what that is. And that could lead into maybe why Doom hates Reed in this universe. I mean, we didn't see any of Doom here and I'm fine with that. But maybe Doom is like, why didn't you tell me? I could have helped you stop Galactus. I am just as smart as you. And because I didn't know, I didn't have this information, I was not able to save our world. And I blame you for that. That could be how that relationship plays out. And speaking of that version of the story, I do think the inclusion here of John Malkovich in this trailer is interesting. I mean, on one hand, like, he's an actor people recognize, so like, put him in the movie. It gets people talking. If the reports are true, he's playing a character named the Red Ghost, who in Marvel Comics is not an incredibly significant character. Even in Fantastic Four mythos, not an incredibly significant character. His whole thing is, from what I know, and I don't think I've ever read a book with him in it, he's obsessed with cosmic rays, and he uses cosmic rays to give his apes superpowers, because he's from that generation of comics where it was like, put a monkey in the comic. People love apes and monkeys. That's why so many like Superman comics are just like, a monkey is on the cover because the people love it. The people crave the monkeys. But anyway, I think it's interesting that he's in this. I think it's interesting that he looks old. Now, that is what the character looks like in the comics, but I do think the way that he is framed in the trailer... Okay, so another theory, because people have said maybe what they're doing with these villains is they're going to have a lot of villains show up in the beginning of the movie as like, these are guys Fantastic Four beat, isn't that fun? And one of them might be him. And that would make sense. He feels like a classic Fantastic Four villain, so having a moment where like him and Mole Man and the Wizard are all beat up by the Fantastic Four in succession will show like why they are viewed as heroes, maybe some of their greatest hits. I think that would be cool. But I can see a version of this story, and this is kind of the Fantastic Four life story version, where Reed, late in the game, somewhat desperate, turns to some of those villains and says, I need help. I need help fighting Galactus. And a lot of them, like Wizard, Red Ghost, Mole Man, start off as scientists. And maybe, just in my head, based on the way Red Ghost is framed in this, him coming out of the shadows is like, oh, you must be truly desperate to come to me for help. Like, it's me, the old Red Ghost. Like, and also, you know, he probably isn't in jail for life. I feel like maybe he'd be in jail for like a decade. I don't know how long you would go to jail for using monkeys to try to... I don't even know what he wanted to do with the monkeys. Take over the world? I probably can't do that. But, I mean, it's not good to experiment on monkeys. But I don't know what the sentence for that is like. But I imagine he could just be like a free man living in the jungle with his monkeys having a great life. Who Reed has to go search for and be like, hey, listen, I need help. I think that could be a cool idea. Speaking of cool things, Fantastic Car looks cool. I love that it is like kind of a classic, you know, 60s Cadillac. It's got that design to it, or Buick or whatever. I'm not super like versed in cars, but it's very sleek. And I love that. I love that it's going to fly. I believe that made it into one of the early trailers that's leaked, like the D23 trailer or something. But also they just had a big flying one on stage. I think in the trailer you can see behind Sue that the car kind of transforms a little bit, which would make sense because how would you get Ben into it if it was just like a little car? But yeah, I think that's cool. I don't know. As much as I like the look of the original Fantastic Car, I like the idea that they've made a sleek one. And maybe, again, huge maybe part of the story is like in the first generation of the Fantastic Four, like before they were even superheroes, but back when they were just scientists and explorers and whatever, they invented the shitty Fantastic Car that looks like a big hockey puck that you drive around. Then as they became public figures and superheroes, they designed this version of the Fantastic Car. Not saying that's what I think is happening, but I do think that is what could be happening. And then maybe later them taking the regular Fantastic Car out of storage would be like, hey, look, they've, you know, re-embraced their roots and they're getting rid of this celebrity thing. Again, just an option. I think the effects look awesome. I really, based on the ones that like look finished, And I think that Ben Grimm effect does look very good. But, like, I think the effects for... Okay, so there's a couple we run through. Herbie, I think, looks really fun. I love the design of this version of their little robot friend. And for people that don't know, this character, I believe, was invented for the television show, or was at least popularized for one of the television shows, where they didn't want to use Johnny Storm because they thought they were going to make a new show about just Johnny Storm, but they're still the Fantastic Four. So what they did was they invented a silly robot friend. There were rumors that, like, kids were lighting themselves on fire. Like, it's an urban legend that kids were lighting themselves on fire, and that's why they took Johnny Storm out of the show, but I'm pretty sure that's not true. Other effects we see, I think the design of the city looks great. Love the buildings. I think the look of Sue using some sort of superpower in the street is great. I love the visual distortion. I think that looks better than both the Jennifer Alba superpowers and the Rooney Mara superpowers. And you guys know, there's one thing that I will harp on, like Marvel and DC about forever, is power signatures. Make the powers look interesting. Make it so that, like, Sue Storm and Magneto and Iron Man can all make force fields, but they all look different. And to be fair, the ones from the Fox movies did not have, like, force fields. They didn't just go like this, you know, and then, like, we'll go, ooh, this is really hard, you know, they got, like, little nosebleeds. But I do think that, I don't know, I think this looks cool. In that same vein, I think the Johnny effects in both of the original movies looked great. I think this one looks great too. I love the shot of him zipping through the city. I'm very into that. I think that looks cool. I think the design of Galactus looks great. You know, curious how much more we see of that. Love Ben running through the street. Love the sound effect, that clunk, clunk, clunk. Good. I think the costumes look cool. I like that each costume is different, either the gloves or the white lining or whatever. I like that they feel like they're part of a team, but they also feel like the costumes serve a purpose. Like there's a reason Johnny has gloves, maybe, that other guys don't. I mean, they really wouldn't explain why Sue has the big white thing and Reed doesn't, but I don't know. I like him. I would like a shirtless Ben at some point, like, but that could be a thing where, you know, over the course of the final battle, it gets ripped off. Like, that would be fine with me. Love him in the trench coat. That looks perfect. And love the eyebrows. Just overall, very, very good. Things we didn't see. No Silver Surfer. No Natasha Lyonne. There are a bunch of actors that have been rumored to be in this, and like Paul Walter Hauser, didn't see any of him. No Doctor Doom, although I didn't think we would see any of him. I think that's fine. You know, I think we focused on the family. I think the trailer set up this narrative of, like, we are a family. Ben is the rock, Johnny is the hothead, I'm the one that holds it all together, and Reed, you're the dad. And I think that is what a Fantastic Four trailer should say to the audience, is the family is what's important. This is the relationship. These is what these characters are like. This is what a little bit of what the movie looks like. I think overall it looked great. We'll talk about the posters. That's getting its own video because that's a whole separate thing. But this teaser, I'm a big fan of. I think it's solid. And you know what else I think is solid? This video's sponsor, Nebula. If you've never heard of it before, Nebula is a subscription streaming service that me and a bunch of other YouTubers, a lot of people you're probably already watching, created because we wanted to have more control over our videos, we didn't want to have to cater to the algorithm, and we wanted to offer a better experience to you guys so you can watch all of my videos. They're all early. Some of them are like a full month early, some of them are like a day early, but every video goes up first on Nebula, and that is Nando V Movies, and that is the Nando Cut, both of my channels, and they're completely ad-free, so there's no ads in the middle, and there's no sponsor read at the end. And in so thank you so much for watching. That's all I got. Stuff that we are working on. One thing that I am very excited about is a show called Abolish Everything. This is a live show that happens in the city where people come in and bring something that they hate, and they give a short presentation on why it should be abolished. Then a panel of experts goes in and questions them. And I'm excited for Abolish Everything because, like Nebula, we have a reputation for being very smart. We have a lot of very, very educated people who do research and make documentaries, but we also have a lot of really funny people, and I am excited to see that side of Nebula growing. And I always say, a year of Nebula is a steal at $5 a month or $60 a year. But if you use the code TheNandoCut at checkout, you can get a year of Nebula for $36. It's a great deal. Check it out. Go to go.nebula.tv/TheNandoCut. Use the code TheNandoCut at checkout. I guarantee you'll find something cool you're going to like. All right, so thank you so much for watching. That's all I got. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.